Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. And can I just start by paying tribute to the Honourable Member for Glasgow Central, who has set out the severe impacts that this Brexit proposition is having with regards to the Scottish economy. And it's a shame that the title of this debate is Leaving the EU, the impacts on the UK. I think we'll need more than one debate to go through all of the impacts, and she ran through very quickly a lot of the impacts that are affecting Scottish business. Mr Deputy Speaker, can I take members of the House of Commons back to Christmas Eve? I'm sure we can all just about remember. We were all turning our attention to our family Christmas traditions. We were putting on our Christmas jumpers, double-checking we had everything for Christmas Day, cutting sellotape with our teeth, examining the TV guide to see where we could watch It's a Wonderful Life, and perhaps even thinking about a small libation or two. I'm sure our thoughts would have been turning to family and friends who were unable to celebrate Christmas with us due to the lockdown. And then, out of the mulled wine haze, appears not Santa Claus but the Prime Minister, sitting in front of the Downing Street Christmas tree, delivering an "All I Want for Christmas is an EU trade deal" address to the nation. He gleefully proclaimed that the UK and EU had come to a last-minute trading cooperation agreement. There would be no tariffs on goods. The Northern Irish Protocol would be maintained so the government would not break international law. And rather surprisingly, and I quote, there would be no non-tariff barriers. Well, I hope Santa was listening very clearly, as he really shouldn't be delivering gifts to those who don't tell the truth. Going all the way back to the day after the EU referendum, it was always going to be the case that the cold reality of Brexit would one day disinfect all those undeliverable Tory promises given to the British people at the time and since then. And that is exactly what has happened. The bare-bones Brexit deal that was so lauded by the Prime Minister falls way short of what was promised and what was needed. It's not get Brexit done, as the Minister said, it's get done by Brexit. At a time when our country faces one of the biggest economic recessions of any developed nation, with our businesses under increasing strain from the pandemic, they also have to try and navigate new trading rules with the UK's largest trading partner that has reduced exporting output by 60%. And what will happen when the EU economies start to fully reopen? That is when this deal will be truly tested. The current deal is holding back British businesses with reams of new red tape and unnecessary bureaucracy. They were promised no non-tariff barriers. This government's lack of leadership and clarity and constant dither and delay means they are facing challenges that they certainly weren't prepared for. Mr Deputy Speaker, it didn't have to be this way. Instead of sticking their heads in the sand, the government could have worked with industry to get ready. They could have focused on practical action to support businesses, measures like recruiting and training the promised 50,000 plus customs agents we knew were needed to get these checks done. They could have used the transition period for what it was designed for, transitioning to the new arrangements. Instead, they wasted that period on negotiating this deal. The government thinks the deal they got on Christmas Eve is the end of this, but sectors of the economy know this is just the beginning of these huge difficulties and challenges, and for some, unfortunately, it's the beginning of the end for their businesses. It's certainly the beginning of the end for many exporting, and none more so than the Scottish fishing industry. The Brexit deal is neither what Scotland's fishing sector needed nor what it was promised. Will not surprise anyone. The devastating delays that the sector is facing were entirely predictable. There is anger and frustration from our fishers who have been very, very badly let down. The Scottish Fishing Federation Chief Executive, I'm glad I haven't been drinking at lunchtime, Mr Deputy Speaker, the Scottish Fishing Federation Chief Executive, that's my impression of Sean Connery as well, Elspeth MacDonald, was scathing. She said, this deal falls very far short of the commitments and promises that were made to the fishing industry by those at the highest level of government. It's a pattern, isn't it? What about Scottish agriculture? There has been nothing positive for farmers in leaving the EU with this deal. They are happy that a no deal was avoided, but where are the sunny uplands that they were promised? They too say something very familiar. The PM, the Prime Minister, is getting a reputation for not just over-promising and under-delivering, but over-promising and then delivering nothing. Happy to give way.
I'm grateful to Ian Murray for giving way, because I just had to check. I'm grateful to the Shadow Scottish Secretary for giving way, because he's spoken a lot about the deal, but the deal he voted for in this House in December of last year. However, his new Scottish Party leader in Holyrood voted against it. Who's right, the leader of Scottish Labour or the Labour Shadow Scottish Secretary?
Well, it's a very boring and predictable intervention, because he knows that we voted for it to avoid the very no deal that his government were threatening to do. And he knows as well, and he's just about to rejoin the Scottish Parliament, so I hope he gets the rules in train before he does actually rejoin them, assuming he wins, of course, is that that was not what the debate was about in the Scottish Parliament. It was about something completely different, and not about whether or not you accepted or did not accept the deal. So he knows that not to be the case. This trade deal leaves a huge amount of... it would be much better rather than chuntering for him to tell us and give some reassurance to the fishing industry and the Scottish farming industry, because this is what they're saying to us. This is what they're putting on the record. This isn't me making this up. So giving some reassurance and working together to resolve some of the problems might be a good starting point. The trade deal leaves a huge amount of uncertainty and falls short of what is needed and promised. And they are clear that they will not stand by and see a weakening of import standards on food and allow Scottish and British produce to be undercut by others. We need concrete guarantees that food and farming standards will remain at least as high as they are now. And what about services, Mr Deputy Speaker? Financial services in Scotland maintains 162,000 jobs and nearly 10% of GDP. Across the UK, it contributed £75.6 billion to the Treasury in the year before COVID. Nothing in this agreement for 80% of our economy that supports millions of jobs and livelihoods. I hope the Minister, when responding, can tell us that the EU-UK Memorandum of Understanding with Financial Services that is due to be signed by the end of March this year will give the sector what they were promised. They were promised. They need to secure a long-term agreement with the EU on financial services equivalence and to ensure we improve access to EU markets for the wider professional services industry so that the UK and Scotland can remain global hubs for financial services sector. These are just three sectors that I've mentioned. The Honourable Lady for Glasgow Central mentioned others that have been disadvantaged by this deal, but we could have talked about so many others. Chemicals, petrochemicals, energy, etc. The list is endless. And there is no wonder there's frustration, as it transpires that there could have been deals done that would have made things easier for people. We could have stayed in the Erasmus programme, and whilst I welcome aspects of the new children's scheme, the government could have done both. That would have been a truly global Britain, stay in Erasmus Plus and do the children's scheme for non-EU countries. We could have had a deal for our performers and production tours. It was on offer, but turned down. Why? The government policy seems to be to cut our nose off to spite our face. I hope a solution can be found, or it will be more damage to another of the UK's jewels in the crown in terms of our creative industries. These issues don't need government platitudes or more promises to be broken, but action and resolution now. The Brexit reality is everything from fishing, shellfish rotting on our motorway to stopping our musicians from touring across Europe. The sunny uplands that were promised is a 4% hit to GDP, the equivalent of £3,600 for every household in the UK, according to the House of Commons Library. And it's a shame we don't have time to deal with the Northern Ireland Protocol and the threats to the Good Friday Agreement. But it's worth turning to the SNP's approach too, to the EU as well. They have brought this debate, after all, to the Chamber today, because we have heard it time and time again in this Chamber and elsewhere. The UK has left the EU, so Scotland needs to leave the UK. As a former Labour MP and Europe Minister Douglas Alexander said in an article in the New European just this week, independence for Scotland, as a result for Brexit, would represent a reckless hold-my-beer response. All of us who campaigned to stay in the EU and strained every sinew to ensure the case was made are disappointed. Of course we're angry. Many are still grieving about leaving the EU. But for the response to be to rip Scotland out of the UK would add catastrophically to that position. The UK has left its largest trading partner in the EU. Of course, that is bad. We're going to hear that right throughout this debate. Scotland leaving its largest trading partner in the UK would be immeasurably worse. We need a remedy for Brexit, not a hugely damaging I told you so moment from Scotland. And I didn't vote Remain for my vote to be misappropriated. Happy to give way in.
I thank him for giving way in. Obviously, we hear a lot that England's our biggest trading partner, which is true, but does he accept that 62% of goods that manufactured in Scotland actually go to the EU? So the EU is our biggest trader for manufactured goods.
The LAC report said that, and the LAC report that the LAC used to be lauded by the First Minister, said that Scottish independence would be 3 times worse than Brexit. So everything that your honourable friend said from Glasgow Central, times it by at least 3. Times it by at least 3. And then you can see the impact on what would happen in terms of the... No, well, here we go again. You know, you try and shine some light on the facts of what would happen. You try and shine some light from the London School of Economics, an organisation that used to be lauded and quoted in this chamber every single day by the Scottish National Party, and all you get is, oh, better together. No, give us some answers to these questions. That's what people are crying out for, is for people to be honest and just answer these questions. I didn't vote, as I was saying, Mr Deputy Speaker, for my vote in the EU referendum to be misappropriated by the nationalists to break up the UK. It's not their vote to do that with. I wonder now if the no-deal SNP regrets spending less on the EU referendum than they did chasing a few thousand votes in their failed bid to win the Shetland Scottish parliamentary by-election. And the most extraordinary aspect of the debate in Scotland is the SNP promising a seamless transition back into the EU if the public were to vote for a separate Scotland. It's another in a long line of assertions that are not based on fact or not backed by any satisfactory answer. And indeed, we heard in the intervention from the Honourable Gentleman from Moray about asking the SNP Shadow Chancellor what the currency would be. No answer. Can you imagine the Shadow Chancellor standing at this dispatch box or the Chancellor standing at that dispatch box, unable to tell the country what the currency of that country would be? They would be laughed out of this chamber. They would have to resign before they made it behind your Speaker's chair, Mr Deputy Speaker. And one thing is for sure, Brexit shows us that breaking up is incredibly hard to do. I'm disappointed again today that the SNP have a debate on the EU in this House but don't take any time at all to lay out why, how and if they will be able to get back into the EU for a hypothetical independent Scotland. Maybe they will answer some of the key questions, as their separation strategy seems very similar to Nigel Farage's strategy in terms of the Brexiteers. They want to cherry-pick the best bits of the EU, but not take the bits that they know the public would find unpalatable. Their proposition is that it would seamlessly rejoin the EU as an independent nation, but not take the euro, or sign up to Schengen, or meet the deficit and debt requirements, or have their own currency, or meet the exchange rate mechanism rules, or re-enter the common fisheries policy. Their Stellenisation plan excludes them from entering the exchange rate mechanism. And most astonishingly, the Scottish Health Secretary said on Question Time last month that Scotland would not need to sign up to the very trade and cooperation agreement we're debating today between the EU and the UK that I and they are rallying against in this debate. How is that even possible? Scotland would become an independent nation, would seamlessly go back into the European Union, and then Scotland wouldn't even have to implement the trade and cooperation agreement that was signed between the UK and the EU at the border at Berwick. It is just implausible. We know that the relationship between Scotland and the rest of the UK, in that hypothetical event that Scotland was ripped out of the UK, would be determined by the very trade and cooperation agreement that was signed on Christmas Eve by the Prime Minister. So all the problems that are currently being faced by Scottish industry, like fishing, manufacturing, agriculture, exporters, financial services that we'll hear about this evening, would be fivefold and more, as the rest of the UK is by far and away the largest market for Scottish goods and services. It just doesn't make sense. And it's about time the SNP faced up to these key questions and were straight with the Scottish public. That is all I ask. Be straight with the Scottish public and answer the questions. So Scotland currently has two governments making promises to the Scottish people they can't deliver. Making promises to the people and businesses of Scotland they've no intention of delivering. The problem is that the UK government sees the relationship with this limited last-minute deal between the UK and the EU as being the ceiling of their ambition. We've heard that tonight from the Minister. We don't. We see it as being the floor from which to build. We need to work hand in hand with industry, business, our trade unions and our European partners and friends with practical solutions so we can face the challenges that have been thrown up by this deal with the EU and grab hold of those future opportunities. This deal must be built upon. This must be the starting point, not the end point. We have to live in the reality, and while we would not have got us to this position, this is where we are. It has to be about a deeper, mutually beneficial relationship. That means businesses can thrive. It means repairing the tattered relationship with our EU partners. It means putting aside the ideological nationalist agenda from both governments and working in the national interest. And now more than ever, I conclude on this, Mr Deputy Speaker, we need what the Scottish public are crying out for. Both governments, the Scottish and UK government, to work together to mitigate the aspects and the disadvantages of COVID and Brexit. But I fear, Mr Deputy Speaker, that I won't need to hold my breath. 4 minute limit.